Welcome to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm Melissa Joy, a certified financial planner and the founder of Pearl Planning. My goal is to help you streamline and organize your finances, navigate big money decisions with confidence, and be strategic in order to grow your wealth. As a woman, you work hard for your money, and I'm here to help you make the most of it. Now, let's get into the show. How do you build from a place where communication just feels awful, where there's past baggage that is getting in the way of getting things done, whether it comes to money or to life? That's going to be the focus of our conversation today. And I'm joined by someone who has learned from experience and is helping others because of this experience. Joni Woods is a relationship and communication coach. And she likes to say that the best relationships come from a form of healthy communication. Joni's going to tell us a little bit about her story and the work that she does and give us some communication tips. And I think this weaves into all of the work that we do and we talk about on our podcast about how to do better when it comes to money. Joni, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so glad you're here, and your origin story is one that could easily be a reason to not do the coaching, not do the work, but instead you've made it your purpose. Can you tell us a little bit, starting with the father of your children, your ex-husband, and communication with his family about, kind of how you learned the importance of communication, done right or done wrong?
Well, I'll tell you, it started out by being done wrong in a lot of ways. I think when you're done with a relationship, you just assume you're done. And that was mistake number one. Nobody told me that, hey, you might want to consider a way of figuring out how to communicate, not only with my ex-husband, because we had no co-parenting relationship, but just even his family and what that would look like. Not a lot of people expect their ex to pass away suddenly within 72 hours. He was gone. And because we hadn't focused on that, because I hadn't focused on that, it was really difficult to even engage in the conversation of, you are welcome to come see the kids.
How old were your kids at this time?
So it was 2020. And so that was 4 years ago. So my son would have been 12 going on 13, or 13 going on 14. He was getting ready to start 8th grade. And then my daughter, so 8 or 9, like somewhere in there.
They couldn't manage their own communication, though, with his family.
Exactly. And they didn't know. They didn't understand why they weren't hearing from them. They didn't understand, because as much as I tried to welcome them into my home, because I hadn't set a precedence through our communication of just being open and genuine, I don't know that they felt that in their griefest moment. They had lost their son, they had lost their brother, that kind of stuff. So it was difficult. It was really difficult. And my kids paid the price for it, because eventually my kids started asking what they had done wrong. And that's not okay. Like that was on me. I should never have allowed it to get to the point where they're wanting to know, in the worst situation of their life, what they did wrong. They did nothing wrong. I did it all wrong. But I wouldn't have gotten to that point had I not taken the time to go, how should I have done this better so that I can do things better in the future? Because they deserve a relationship with my ex-husband's family. They're actually right now in Springfield, Illinois, hanging out with their grandparents, and they're attending the family reunions. I mean, they need those people in their lives, if anything, just to say, I have people in my life.
I love hearing that. And your work now has expanded beyond co-parenting or intergenerational communication coaching to professional settings, to all sorts of settings. But I think one of the first things that sticks out to me is, I know when people are going through trauma, through unexpected, difficult situations, even unexpected beneficial situations, that it's very difficult to navigate the emotions that are happening and all of the other elements that, whether you won the lottery or lost someone unexpectedly, there's a lot going on, a lot of other people in your ear saying, here's what should be happening. This is what's right. This is what's wrong. And you had come from a professional place where you had a background in ministry, correct? So you're introspective, thinking about purpose and things like that. What did you learn that could be a pathway for yourself and others to communicate better or kind of fix broken communication lines?
I think that fixing broken communication line, just any kind of communication, starts with you. You've got to figure out, am I the creator of my own suffering? I had to look at the situation with my ex's family and go, okay, well, that was on me, and I'm suffering in these kind of situations because I didn't learn how to be better. And it's not true in every situation, but we all play a part in our daily lives. Our lives just don't happen to us. They happen from our choices, whether it's something that's coming and biting you in the ass again, it's just, they come from your choices, and you need to be not only self-aware enough to recognize that, but you also have to be accountable to that. Very rarely are we collateral damage in someone else's poor decisions. It happens, it does. But even then, like, I've looked at bad friendships that I knew I should have walked away from a long time ago, and I was collateral damage in their drama. And I was like, but I knew it.
That was
I
a
knew
choice.
Yeah, I chose to stay in that situation because, for whatever reason, my savior complex, like all of those kind of things, even being a youth and young adult pastor for the longest time, I felt personally responsible for making sure that I was reaching everybody. But at the end of the day, I ended up burnt out. So I have to go, is that really what ministry is about? Or is it just being genuine and authentic? And so it's that self-awareness, it's asking those questions that I think is the best way to learn how to communicate through trauma, through the really difficult times.
So let's say that you evaluate the circumstances and you decide that you're not collateral damage. You want to be proactive, but you also, with communication, obviously there's yourself and then whoever else or whatever else or however many people you're also trying to make decisions with, talk to, explain your perspective, things like that. How do you send the olive branch when things have hit a disconnect, which happens so often when it comes to money and families or groups of people? When groups of people are involved, it's just really, you're not just navigating checks and accounts and dollars and cents. You're also navigating people, emotions, past relationships, history. How do you start to, reset the table if things have gone off the rails?
The first step I suggest, this is kind of where active listening comes in, but it's more than just like listening to the situation. It's recognizing, one, the growth that you've just done, the self-reflection, the self-awareness, all that kind of stuff. Recognizing that you've taken the time to do that, and then not in a bad way, but going, would someone else have done that work? Because I don't know what, after my ex passed, I don't know that they would have done that work had I not gone, okay, well, one of us has to. One of us has to.
If not me, who?
Right, exactly. And so when you're able to say, I'm not sure that they are even in a place where they can have that kind of self-awareness. So because of that, I can give grace. I can suddenly be like, okay, I've done the work, and it doesn't put me at a level that's, like people are like, oh, well, that just means I'm better. No, actually, that just means you're able to be more empathetic. You're able to take yourself out of your position and say, okay, if they're not there yet, how do I help them get there so that we have a healthier relationship? And to do that, that means I have to take myself out of my situation and my feelings and my frustrations and put myself in their situation, their feelings, their frustrations. And I wouldn't necessarily even say we know 50% of what they're thinking, but it's a start. It's something that says, okay, how can I better understand you so that we can relate better? That's what I think active listening really is. It's not just being like, oh, wait, what was that? Like putting your ears there. No. It's going, okay, how do I feel what you're feeling? How do I see what you're seeing? How do I take my lenses off and put yours on so that I can give more grace?
Well, that's a really vulnerable decision, right? Because you are opening yourself up to however they see you with, which may or may not feel the same as how you see yourself. You may also, though, be giving yourself less credit than you deserve. Who knows? Sometimes I suspect, and I know this is some of the work that you do, that it's helpful to have a third party, because pulling those lenses off or the assumptions are that everybody has their own perspective and history, and there's so much water under the bridge that it's difficult to reset the table. How does a third party or a mediator assist with opening up the components of communication?
When I'm brought into a group, it's less mediation, because mediation is you give to get.
Right. Or maybe two rooms and somebody's going in between the two rooms. Like if anybody's been through a mediation and divorce.
Right. And I've done that. But that's what I tell my clients is I'm like, we're not trying to give up something to feel like you lost. We're trying to ask questions so that we kind of meet in the middle. So as you're asking questions like, okay, what is it that I need out of this situation? What is it that I'm lacking, or what is it that I can give? What is it that you need that I can meet your need and give? And just like keep building on that so that you meet in the middle. That's how I approach third party conversations when I go in.
What would be some examples, not to disclose anybody's personal information, but some examples of groups that might approach you to help to be a facilitator or consultant on this?
I've done everything from corporate to I have the honor right now of working with a family who is trying to figure out the best solution for caring for a family member. And the family members are coming together, and there's not necessarily differences in the fact that they want to see their family member have the best quality of life. It's actually like, how can I play a role? What can I do? And so I said, let's start with questions. Like, what questions do you have? We have a lot of statements. There's a lot of like concerns and
should
issues, like opinions. Let's put all of those aside and let's come with the questions, because that is how we come to a better solution instead of making assumptions.
Well, and I also think with open-ended questions, you can get a better perspective for that empathy that you're asking for people to bring to the room. Versus going straight to the, you've been stewing on it and then say, this is what needs to happen. Well, then other people don't feel seen, heard, or they may have other considerations that would be helpful to understand.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and those family dynamics are so interesting. And we come up against some in so many different ways, whether your first example of co-parenting after a relationship, thinking about generational needs, sandwich generation. Also in the corporate setting, you could be at work where the need to understand the motivations of other people would be so helpful to advocating for the outcomes that you need, or else sometimes perhaps, I don't know if you have to do this, saying it's okay if it's not the way that you see it, that is the final outcome. What are your suggestions in that unhealthy or difficult or challenging communication in the workplace?
My biggest advice would be, just because you talk about it doesn't mean you're going to find a solution. Sometimes the solution is just being able to be like, okay, it's time to move on. But I feel that way in like relationships to a degree, obviously not family. But, if you talk about it and needs aren't being met, goals aren't being set, like that kind of stuff, we're not elevating our relationship, whatever that looks like, manager, boss, employee. If you're not elevating those through healthy communication, then maybe it's time to just say, okay, this isn't the place for me anymore. And I think that's where people get scared. They're scared to end something to find a new beginning.
Yeah, I can think of a conversation I need to have with a client now, and it's not really my decision. The question was, can I quit? And it's a lot more complicated than the money person can. We work with strategies that can be bridges to the need to make different changes, and certainly financial planning gives you more options and opportunities because you planned for the unexpected and also done your best, hopefully, with money decisions over time. But that is so interesting because I think the communication coach can be a really big deal. And then also I think it's true, not everything is fixable, nor should it be. Everybody's bringing their own autonomy, hopefully, to the table, and they have that power to, in many cases, in not all cases, but many cases, to walk away.
Yeah. Well, and everyone grows. Hopefully that's what you're doing. You're growing your emotional intelligence. You're growing your awareness. You're realizing that the behaviors maybe aren't okay for now and who it is that you want to be as a person. So when you're able to start doing that, and then you can say, okay, maybe this is time. Maybe this is something I just need to let go instead of holding on to it so tight.
Are there any reading or listening materials that if you are listening to this conversation saying, oh, I think this is one of the ways that I would love to grow is be a better communicator, be more effective, navigate the challenges, confront them versus, letting them fester or meander. What do you recommend? Where can you learn more that would be effective and not just here's the problem, but here's how to address it?
The book that I use in my training courses is Nonviolent Communication by Dr. B. Rosenberg. It's interesting because it kind of feels like a textbook. So you have to take your time with it and you have to go through it again. And there's exercises and then you practice. Every step felt hard. Like the first step is observation over evaluation. You want to learn how to observe and not just make assumptions. And I liken it to the game charades.
Oh, interesting.
When you're playing charades and someone is like trying to show you like, this is the movie, instead of just shouting the answers, you start asking questions. So it brings you closer to figuring out the answer as opposed to getting frustrated because suddenly, if you're playing charades and you're trying to say the sun and you're doing big circles and it's like, right, like you can't say anything. And someone's just yelling at you, ball, circle. And you're like, oh, how do I do it? Instead of asking questions like, okay, are you round? Yes. Like just asking those questions that slowly bring you together, as opposed to like when you're yelling and evaluating, it just keeps building a wall because suddenly the person trying to communicate is frustrated that they're not getting their message across. And the person that's trying to figure it out is frustrated because you're not getting your message across. So that book is so good when it breaks those things down.
Oh, that's really interesting. I love to hear that. Well, going through, you also are very open about talking about another personal challenge that you had. You experienced a fire at your personal home. In all of these experiences, you're talking about you're just vulnerable and open. And I think it's so helpful for other people to learn from that. But I also know, you have a constructive, growing spirit. Of course, I'm sure there are days where you're just like, why is this happening to me? But can you tell me a little bit more about what you've learned from those experiences and why you think you've been able to be as resilient as you have and also share that with your children and your family?
I think a lot of that came from when I decided to get a divorce. I knew I was going to be up against wall after roadblock, after bump, after everything like that. And so in order to make a decision like that, where I was ending a 15-year marriage, where it meant that I might never be able to help people the way that I used to as a youth and young adult pastor, because once you divorce, and that was, almost 10 years ago, things have changed, but like nobody would want me anymore. All of those kind of things, there's the possibility that I would be single for the rest of my life. There's all of that, but getting out of that relationship was worth every roadblock that I came across. But in order to be okay with that, I had to make that decision day one. I couldn't come back to it and be like, oh, maybe. Like for me, I've always been someone that once I make a decision, I've made a decision. It's going to happen and I'm not going back. Like I'm going to figure this out. And it was because I wanted to see two happy homes. That's what I told my kids. We were miserable. They were miserable. I was miserable. My ex-husband was miserable. And the only goal I had was two happy homes. And that's what I stuck to. I just stuck to it and I stuck to it and I stuck to it. And so when the fire happened, I was sitting on the side of the road and I remember I called my best friend and just asked, why does this stuff happen to me? And I remember feeling like I need to be crying. I need to be hysterical. And I didn't. I cried a little bit, but I just
I'm sure you were in shock as well. That's something that happens, that is real, whether you have personal injuries or not. So
exactly. Like there were 9 fire trucks. Fire trucks just kept screaming by. You could hear the popping of the windows and the popping of the tires and the engine block. And I barely even remember looking at it because I didn't have to. I didn't have to watch my life go down in flames. I knew it was happening. And I just remember sitting there going, okay, my life is completely different. And what am I going to do? I couldn't complain about what had happened. I couldn't think through, okay, these are the issues. There should have been a fire extinguisher there. The shoulda, couldas weren't going to help me provide for my kids moving forward. They weren't going to help me be strong for my kids. And my daughter's crying and bawling her eyes out. And me going, oh, that should have happened, or we should have done this, that wasn't going to help. It just wasn't. What was going to help was for me to go, okay, what's next? Let's do this. I was a zombie. I don't think I slept for the first 36 hours, but it was just, we got to keep going. We can't sit down, because I think sometimes you sit down and you atrophy. Everything starts to get brittle. Everything starts to hurt even more. Actually, I think, your muscles are like, ah, and I think that's why I did what I did and how I did it.
Yeah. And that doesn't discount the power of going through the process of grief. But what you're describing is so universal when it comes to healthy response to adversity, which is focusing on what you can control. So, whether it was a divorce and you can control the outcomes in your household, you get to build that household. You have the opportunity for it. And you also have the opportunity to set a perspective that hopefully can be received in, the co-parenting household. When it comes to a fire, there's taking care of yourself in the initial moments of trauma, but there's also thinking about rebuilding, having healthy space for your kids to grieve, but also to give them the reassurance that you have the capacity to build back and help them not to live in that moment of the rearview mirror. And I think that is something that I've seen, whether it's an investor with a bad investment, an unexpected job loss of a loved one. Things don't always happen in a linear fashion. And having a perspective and mindset that can think through things and continue to build, continue to live can be extraordinarily helpful. Of course, communication matters. I can understand why you're so relational in the work that you do, because you have the right perspective and mindset to navigate and manage your own challenges, but then teach those skills to others in a way that is authentic and vulnerable and not just built on a bulletproof. These will be this is the 4 bullet points on how to communicate. Well, how can people find you if they're interested in learning more about the work that you do as a communication coach?
I'm on probably every social media, LinkedIn, Instagram. You can find me on website. You can Google my name. My face pops up. You'll see me. I'm everywhere. And then pretty much all my contact information is up there.
We'll make sure to have that in show notes. And are you working on a book?
I am working on a book.
What are you going to be talking about there?
So I wrote that book post-divorce. I was working the third shift at a hospital, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. from 2016 to 2017. There's only so much you can do from the hours of 2 to 4, and you got to stay awake. And so I just wrote a book. I had gone through an immediate rebound relationship that was devastating. My father passed away. I hadn't spoken to him in about 4 years, and about 2 days before he died, I had sent him an email just to let him know, hey, I'm getting a divorce. This is what's going on. And so I literally reconnected with my father 2 days before he died. So just all of the lessons that I learned, it's very foundational to who I am right now. I made a lot of mistakes, but I also made a lot of choices. I had never experienced life, and I wanted to experience it so that I knew what I was talking about. One of the corporate jobs that I got, the reason I got it was because he said, you've been through so much and you still like people. Clearly, you're obviously passionate about what you do. I'm a relationship coach, and I've been through some really shitty relationships, but I still believe in them, and I still want to love every person I come in contact with. So the book is a little bit about that, a lot of self-awareness, self-reflection.
Well, everybody has an origin story, whether they know it or they're carrying in their invisible backpack, weighting them down, unbeknownst to them. And whether you're able to articulate it to help with effective communication, or it's always helpful for me to understand your money origin story, the lessons that you learned from growing up or the experiences that you had earlier in life. I think that, I'll be excited to read and maybe have a book group about the book, but then also, I hope it will inspire others to identify their origin stories and help to understand how that makes them who they are today and what they want to keep and what they need to change. So I just think that the work that you're doing and the open conversations that you have about this are so valuable, and I'm so glad that we were able to share it with the audience. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. If you found value in this episode, the best way you can support the podcast is to forward an episode to a friend or leave a review. Go to pearlplan.com and the podcast link to get all the resources and links mentioned.